What's up, guys? I am so excited to be here, man. What an honor it is to be here with you guys, worshiping with you, and just seeing what God is doing here in Flowood and in Vicksburg. Speaking of Vicksburg, can we give it up for our Vicksburg campus right now? Yeah. Vicksburg, I love you. Hate I'm missing you today, but, man, I'm so excited to be here with you guys, with God's Word in hand, and, man, it's going to be such a good time. So let's go ahead and open our Bibles to Matthew chapter 5. And I'll let you go ahead and do that. But while we do that, I just want to complain for a second, really, because that's the best part of my day is just getting to complain sometimes. So, I've got kids, and, all of my kids are 3 and under. I got 4 kids that are 3 and under, so it's kind of fun, but getting dressed for church in the morning is a disaster. I just want to say that. And I'm the kind of person that's just let's get it done, go, 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 go. Why aren't you going faster? And he's 1, you know? So I'm over here just okay, Theo, put one leg first, one leg in your pants, Theo, pants. And it's just oh my gosh, so slow. It's a peeve. It is a peeve of mine. I get peeved. Do you get peeved? I think we get peeved. We all have a pet peeve somewhere. And one of the things that really peeves me, outside of, getting kids dressed in the morning, is flies. I hate flies. Oh my gosh. There's something about flies. I'm glad somebody agrees with me. I thought I was the only one, because Molly looks at me like an idiot. She's like, why are you the way that you are? Because I hate flies. And I say this because my house is a little bit overrun, right? There are tens of thousands of flies in my house. Not really. There are a dozen at a time, right? But it's so annoying. And we don't have a dirty house. Molly, if you know her, she's completely OCD and just we got a clean house, y'all. But there are flies, and there's just something about a fly that's just demeaning. It flies around you, and you're just what's wrong with me? Do I stink? What is this? Flies. I hate flies. And it's the worst because, I'll be cooking or whatever, and they'll be zipping by, and I'm you take my towel, just bah, bah. Right, I figured out you can hold a towel a certain way and hit a fly every single time. I'm a master fly killer at this point, but sometimes I look I don't know, some ninja, but a really redneck ninja, swatting flies with a towel, and I look totally moronic, but it just makes me angry when I sit down at a table and there are flies around me while I'm eating my dinner in my own house. This is my house, Mr. Fly. Go find your own. This is mine. But do you get angry like that? I can't be the only one that gets angry. We all understand anger is something that we all deal with a little bit. I say a little bit. Some of us just always a bit. You know what I'm saying? But, we all understand anger. If you got kids, you know what it's like to be angry. If you got a spouse, you know what it's like to be angry. Right? If you've driven for, somebody said, mm-hmm. If you've driven for more than a day, you know what it's like to be angry, right? If you got friends, you've probably been angry. If you don't have friends, you're probably angry about that, right? So we all understand anger, and we've all been there, and so much so that we've got quotes about it, right? I grew up with some quotes about anger. One of them was, every minute that you're angry is 60 seconds that you give away some peace. Well, that's super kitschy and lame, but they said it. Another one that I've heard recently is holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. That's something that people say. There's a prayer. It's called the Serenity Prayer. It's about anger. Right? It says, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right? This is a prayer that people pray because we all deal with anger. And it's a real thing. We know what we say about anger. We all have a way or two of dealing with anger, right? I deal with anger differently than everybody else, but we have an understanding of it. But the question is what does Jesus say about anger? Right? And this is really why we're here today. So we're in Matthew chapter 5. We're going to look at verse 20, actually. We're going to start in verse 20, just before the anger section here. So let's read. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. And I just want to say right here, this is the thesis statement for everything that we're talking about today. Right? It comes before and is very important. So, we got to keep in mind that the scribes and the Pharisees were incredible rule followers. They were so good at 613 rules. They kept all of them. They were really good at it. That's what they were known for. But they still didn't quite have it, right? They still didn't quite get it. You see Jesus go pretty hard on the Pharisees for the entire Gospels. And so we understand, like, okay, they got it wrong, but if they're so good at following rules, how do I become more righteous than them if they can follow all those rules and I can't, right? So what is it about that helps us understand anger? And it's this word righteousness. So keep this in your head, locked away for a second. And we continue. You've heard that it was said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders will be liable to the judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to the judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. Whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. Now, I want to pull out the main points right here up front to help us understand and kind of give us a roadmap of what we're going to do today. And the roadmap is this. It's that righteousness, this word that I just said in verse 20, this word righteousness demands reconciliation. Reconciliation is just the healing of relationships. That's what it is. So righteousness demands reconciliation. Reconciliation demands action. And reconciling action demands urgency. So this is our roadmap. This is what the Bible says about it. So let's break it down. We're going to first look at why righteousness demands reconciliation. And we see here that we can't exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees, right? And the righteousness, again, they're following the rules. That's what they're doing. But we can't be better than them by just not murdering, right? For a lot of us, that's pretty easy, just to not murder somebody, right? Some of us maybe a little bit harder, I don't know. Like, anyway, I'm pretty sure Molly, it's more difficult for her than it is for me in our house, anyway. But we can't exceed the righteousness of the Pharisees just by not murdering. Jesus calls on the Old Testament law right here. And this is the interesting part. When he says, you have heard that it was said, and they all had at that point. They had all heard that it was said. This is one of the 10 commandments. You shall not murder. So they all understood that very deeply. But he pushes right past that, right past the simple action, and goes straight to the heart of the matter. Straight to the heart of the matter. He's saying, I'm not just interested in what you do, but who you are. Right, that's what he's saying here. And here he equates anger with murder. He equates them. He's saying they're the same. And some of us just walking around all the time just like, if that's the case, just like murdering people. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm driving, somebody cuts me off, dead. You know, y'all know, right? A spouse says something stupid, dead. Right? Your boyfriend didn't call you back when you was supposed to. Well, he ain't calling you back now because dead. You know what I'm saying? And heaven forbid, like somebody just angry at the whole world. Everybody. So here we are. So we can think about this like this. It's so potent what Jesus is saying. If we're going to be angry, and if that is equivalent to murder, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. And not only this, but he kind of goes in on him. He says, if you're angry, you're liable to judgment. And the judgment here is death, right? The Old Testament law says if you murder, you will be killed, right? And this is the judgment. So the penalty is death, which is the same here as the Old Testament. So if you're angry, you are liable to be killed. And liable in this case is you were bound to it, right? You've been caught red-handed, you're going to court, you're going to be sentenced, right? This is what it's saying right now. He's saying if we insult our brothers, is what my version says. Some version says if we say raka, right? Raka is the Greek term here, and raka just means stupid or empty-headed or worthless, right? Some of us have said something like this, like, man, that he ain't worth nothing. Right? That's a very southern phrase, but it's something that we say, right? We've called somebody stupid before, probably. And if that's the case, you're liable to the court. If you say you fool, right? The Greek word here, we all know this Greek word. It's in this specific instance is moros, but comes from moron, right? If you call someone a moron, hey, you idiot, hey, you stupid idiot, right? Like, in that case, you are liable to the hell of fire. And the hell of fire in this instance is the word Gehinnom. And Gehinnom is an actual place where baby sacrifices were made, like they were sacrificing babies to the Canaanite god Moloch, and later turned into a place where people literally just came and dumped all their junk and set it on fire. So there's a big pit, this burning pit called hell, right? So there's a very visual thing that Jesus was doing here for these guys. It's like, if you call someone, if you just call them stupid, you're liable to go thrown in that pit over there and just burn up. And that's something that should be stirring something up in us right now. If it's not stirring something up in you, you need to be thinking about that and praying about it, because that's kind of a big deal, right? Jesus is going really, really deep, pushing way past. And, have you ever just looked at someone and been like, man, you're overreacting? To me, this feels like an overreaction from Jesus. It just kind of does. I can't get away from that. It feels like an overreaction to me. It feels like Jesus is angry at people who are being angry for some reason to me. But anger is so natural for all of us. It's an emotion, right? We all feel it. Some of us can't get away from it. We try really hard. And we start to ask, is it even possible for me to not be angry at all and not be accused of murder? Is that even a possibility? But the truth that we have to understand here is that this kind of contemptuous anger is a symptom of brokenness. Particularly, in this case, probably broken relationships. This contemptuous anger is a symptom of brokenness. And so we see that righteousness, to be better than the Pharisees, if you want to say that, it takes something much deeper. It takes dealing with this brokenness. It takes healing brokenness, which is reconciliation. So righteousness demands reconciliation. We continue in verse 23. So if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Now, to fully understand this, there are a couple of contextual concepts that we need to understand. And the first thing is that in this time, in Jesus' day, in the ancient Jewish culture, making an offering or bringing a gift to the altar, which is typically a sacrifice, some kind of large animal sacrifice, it was a rare thing. People didn't get to do it every single day. But it was one of the highest acts, one of the highest forms of worship in that day, was going to the altar and giving a gift, right? So incredibly high act of worship, a rare thing that people didn't get to do all the time, okay? That's one. The second thing is that this sermon, the Sermon on the Mount, in chapters 5 through 7, is the Sermon on the Mount. It's a big sermon. Was given in Galilee, okay? So Jesus is saying this in Galilee, and the altar that he's talking about, there was only one that they were allowed to give sacrifices on. That was over at the temple in Jerusalem. There's about 80 miles difference between those two places. So Jesus is saying here, after they've traveled 80 miles to get there, if you get there and you're getting ready to, your offering, and you remember right there that your brother has something against you, stop what you're doing, make the week's journey back, 80 miles, fix that relationship, and then come back the other 80 miles, give your gift, and then you got to go back home, right? So this one trip turned into two a whole long month. We see here that this is just incredibly important. Jesus is saying that reconciliation is so important that even this holy act, this incredibly holy act of worship, has to be put on pause to fix those broken relationships. And we understand this. Like, you can just imagine people laughing at Jesus when he's saying this. Like, oh, yeah, I'm going to travel 160 more miles just to go fix this relationship while I'm doing this, right? You can see him laughing at him like that when you start to think about this stuff. But he's saying this is so just utterly important. So we see that reconciliation, according to Jesus, and that's the important part, demands action. It demands action, right? If you got something against your brother or they got something against you, his sisters included, obviously, you've got to go fix that before you can even worship, which tells us something else. Before we can even worship, it means that anger, it means that tension, that spitefulness, all these things, they stop us from worshiping effectively. It just stops us, and we know that. We've seen these relationships. Every time somebody's mad at me, I avoid it at all costs. That's just my personality. I'm a 9 on the Enneagram, which is I never in my life thought I would actually say out loud, especially on stage. But my personality is just avoid it because I don't really want to get in a fight. Right? Every time Molly's mad at me, which is frequent, it's just all right, I'm just going to go over here. I'm going to go to the garage and work on this thing, or go to my office and do this thing. But that's just not a way to live. Right? You just can't live with that kind of tension. Right? There's no freedom. You're bound up by it. You're broken by it. The relationship is hurt because of it. So we see this. We see this right here. And something else. Another way that we can look at this is by asking a specific question. So if you're offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you. And this is the question that I have, is why does it say that your brother has something against you and not the other way around, right? Because this starts off, if you were angry, you were liable to judgment. So why didn't it say, if you have something against your brother, stop what you're doing? Well, it's an interesting question for sure, but it's an easy answer when you really think about it. If I've got something against my brother, what's the fix? I just forgive him. That's easy. Forgiveness. But if my brother has something against me, that takes work. Right? And just as when Molly is upset with me, I avoid her at all costs. There comes a point where I can't take it anymore. And I'll walk up to Molly and I'm like, hey, look, we gotta get through this. Let's talk it out. I'm sorry for whatever I need to be sorry about. And you break the tension. All right? It's more than that, guys. I don't just sorry, whatever. No. But there is a freedom when you don't have the tension of broken relationships in your life. That is freeing in so many ways. What Jesus is saying here is instead of being angry, be free. And we are free. There is a freedom in worship when we don't have the tension of hurting relationships in our lives. Do we understand this? This is a freeing act when we're looking at this by going and reconciling these relationships. And it's just of utmost importance. And we can continue. Verse 25 says, "Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you may be put in prison. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny." So we've seen that righteousness demands reconciliation. Reconciliation demands action, going out and having the action of mending that relationship. And we see here that kind of action, that reconciling action, demands urgency. It says, do it now. Do it before your accuser gets to the court. Meet them halfway and try to settle it there, because if they're going to accuse you of something, you don't know what's going to happen. Maybe you're going to be judged. And my siblings understand this so well, right? Any sibling, if you got siblings, you understand this. You all understand that feeling of pure fear when you hurt your sibling, whether on purpose or accidentally, and they lose their marbles, and you're just like, don't tell mom. You know what I'm talking about? We all know that feeling. It's don't tell mom, because as soon as mom finds out, I'm toast. Right? You heal that relationship now. You settle those debts now. You know what I'm saying? Right? It's not a do it later. It's a go right now and do it. It requires urgency. And this goes both ways. This whole anger concept, it goes both ways. It's not just go and heal that relationship, but it's also forgive people who you're angry at. Why are we angry? Why are we ever angry? Typically, it's because we're hurt or scared, frustrated, some other thing. But we can forgive also. You know, Matthew 18 is a great parable. Let me find it. It starts in verse 23. It's the parable of the unforgiving servant. And I'll just kind of tell the story. There's a king in this parable who's ready to settle all his debts with his servants. And there's this one particular servant who just owes him millions. And the king's like, all right, I'm going to sell you. I'm going to sell your wife. I'm going to sell your kid. I'm going to sell everything you own to settle this debt. And the servant's just on his knees. No, please just wait. I promise I'll pay it back. And the king is pretty cool. He forgives the debt completely. He says, I'm just going to wipe your slate clean. We're good. And then this servant, he goes out and he's got debts to settle as well. So he goes to one of the people that owes him thousands of dollars, not even as much as he owed the king. And he says, all right, give me all the money. And the servant's like, oh, he falls on his knees, like, no, I can't pay you right now, but I promise I'll do it. And the servant, instead of forgiving that person's debt and wiping the slate clean, he says, no. And he sends that person to jail until the debt is paid. Well, the other servants of the king see this, and they're just infuriated, and they tell the king about this guy. And the king calls him back and is like, you wicked person. I forgave you of all of your debt, and you couldn't go forgive him? And so he put him in jail. All right, this is the same concept, and it's interesting. He put him in jail until he pays the last penny. Just like in this verse right here in Matthew 5. Truly I say to you, you will never get out until you've paid the last penny. So it's not just about going out and reconciling relationships, but it's about your own heart. Instead of being angry with that person, it's go forgive them. And we can do that because we have been forgiven already. And this is who God is for us, who Jesus is for us. And so I don't want to walk away from this without a little practical application, a little practical something to help you out here, hopefully, to deal with anger and to deal with some of this. It comes in kind of two steps. It's deal with your anger first, and then go heal the relationship, right? And so to help understand this, how do you deal with your anger? One of the things that in my short lifespan I have understood was that anger is a secondary emotion, which is very interesting. Molly and I went to marriage counseling a while back, and we were talking through some stuff and just cleaning up the relationship and everything. And our guy was just like, hey, it's a secondary emotion. There's something deeper here at work that you need to deal with, whether that is hurt or frustration or rejection or anything like that, right? It comes secondary. We are angry in response to something else, some other brokenness. So when we're looking at this and we're dealing with our own anger, we can understand, okay, if I'm angry, what is really at work here? And I can deal with that way. Y'all with me? So you start there. You start to deal with your own anger, and then you go out and deal with the relationship. So, and really what this is saying, you don't want to go up to somebody just ticked off and just yell at them. That ain't it. That ain't it, right? It is deal with your anger and then humble yourself. This is the part about going out. You start with humility, period. Start with humility. Be humble. And then as you're being humble, you can go up to this person with humility and respect and love. One of my uncle has 5 daughters, and he's really wanted that boy, but he's got 5 daughters. And they're all like stacked, kind of like mine are, right in a row. And the older 2 are polar opposites. They are the opposite person. There's no way around it. There are no 2 different people like that are more different in the world than these 2. So they fought like cats and dogs. But like my uncle and his wife did this like Jedi mind trick on these kids, and like they are inseparable. They are the best of friends. There's like I've never seen 2 closer people than these 2 people. And this Jedi mind trick was very simple with these girls growing up. It was, y'all quit fighting. You're best friends. You're best friends. And we just repeat, you're best friends. And they were just like, yeah, we're best friends. So they just stopped fighting. It was incredible. But there's something about this that works. Is when you're going to someone in humility and you're angry at them. If you're angry at someone, it's probably because you have some relationship with them, typically. Remind each other who you are to each other. Man, this is who you are to me. I love you so much. And I want this relationship to keep going. And it goes at whatever level. It doesn't have to be a spouse, right? It could be the acquaintance down the hall that was talking bad about you over something. But you can just go up, hey man, you know what? We've been working here for a long time together. And man, I've always appreciated your friendship. And this is what happened, but you know what? I just want to push past this and let's be friends. Can we continue this relationship in a healthy way? Right? It's that. Remind each other who you are to each other, because that typically overcomes the anger. So deal with your own anger so that you can have this conversation without yelling at them. And then go and heal that relationship in humility and reminding each other who you are to each other. And that's it. So we see here in this passage that anger is a symptom of a brokenness inside. It is an outward expression of an inward reality. And when we're dealing with this anger, Jesus equates it. He says, if you're angry, you might as well have murdered them in your heart. And there are so many people that say, oh, wow, like, is it even possible? Chance, you can come on up. Is it even possible to deal with this anger? Is it even possible to let it go? And so many times you'll see here in the Sermon on the Mount, as we continue in this series, you'll see like, oh, is it even possible to do any of this? What Jesus says, is it even possible? Most people think it is completely impossible to do. And if you try to do it by yourself, it is. But we've got Jesus. We've got Jesus. We've got God on our side working inside of us. And if we give ourselves over to this teaching, to give ourselves over to the truth of Jesus Christ, we can start to understand that God will give us a new heart, a fresh start, a heart that can forgive. We can be in a place that no matter where we are, where we've been, we can forgive other people even when they're in front of us, yelling at us in our face, throwing punches at us. We can understand that I don't have to be angry at you. We start to be broken for those people who are blind to the truth of Jesus Christ, who came and lived and died and rose again, who is resurrected for us, forgiving us of our sins, forgiving us of our debts, wiping our slate clean. And we can start to grieve instead of be angry. Because when we're grieving for the world, I'm totally convinced that Jesus was the saddest person that ever lived. The most grieving person that ever lived. How else do you see people? You know, you see Jesus up on the cross here and people are playing dice at his feet. And you just want to scream at those guys, look up. See what the Savior of the world is doing for you right now. And Jesus never said anything. Actually said, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. How do you do that except but to grieve for them and grieve that they're lost and grieve and hurt and be broken in your soul for that person who doesn't understand and is totally blind to the truth and the reality of Jesus? This is one of the ways that we can deal with our anger is to let God give us a new heart, a grieving heart for these people. And could you imagine it? Man, could you imagine it? A whole community, a whole church here in Flowood, here in Vicksburg, whole churches of people, whole communities of people where everybody said, you know what? I want this new heart where I don't have to be angry, We don't have to worry about tense relationships and broken relationships, but people who actively seek out reconciliation, who serve the God of reconciliation. This whole book is about reconciling us back to God. And I say, I want to serve that God, and I want to be like him. A whole community where, man, everybody just has a heart to forgive, has grace-filled, mercy-filled hearts of forgiveness, and lays aside anger and lays aside frustration and has patience and is full of the fruit of the Spirit, having patience and having grace for other people, understanding the brokenness in the world. What is that like? What would that be like when everybody says, I'm going to take this seriously? I'm going to let God move in my heart right now. Not to be kitschy or whatever, but that sounds like the good life. That sounds like the good life to me, where everybody loves each other, truly. We're going to go into a time of prayer. And in this time of prayer, I want to ask you guys to open up your hearts. And if there's anger, if there's frustration, if there's pain in your heart for another person, just let it go. Give it to God. Say, God, I'll let you handle this. And if there's somebody who is angry at you, I want to kind of charge you right now. Go deal with that. Now, not later. Don't sit on it. Don't sit on your anger. Paul says, don't let the sun go down on your anger. So let's open up our hearts in prayer. God, thank you for today.